friends, and welcome to my Unhealthy podcast, where we are on a journey to transform our unhealthy choices into healthier ones. I'm your host, Uncle Marv, and I am excited to dive into today's show. This is part 2 of an episode that I had with Emma Vitlucci, and it is going to be a fantastic show. For those of you new, this is a show where we talk about all things wellness. We don't just focus on diet and exercise. We take a holistic approach to health and well-being. On this show, we explore topics like mindset, self-care, emotional eating, and even how to use technology to support our wellness goals. So usually I'll be joined by a friend or an expert guest, psychologist, nutrition coach, wellness gurus, and they'll all share their insights and personal experiences to help us learn how to live healthy and be happy. As I mentioned, today we are back with Emma, and we are talking about successful relationship strategies, specifically for those of us that are busy professionals. So Emma, welcome back.
Hello, I'm so happy to be back.
I'm glad you are. I first want to start off by saying thank you for agreeing to come back on the show. We, of course, got a little carried away with my questions. So
we had too much fun. It's all good.
That is great. So on that show, we started to talk about your 5 elements for the successful relationship strategy, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And we only got through 2.
Yep. We carried away a little bit. We had so much fun.
So, folks, if you want to find the first 2, I'll recap them real quick. But the full show was released back on April 4th, 5 elements of a successful relationship strategy. And in there, we talked about the first element, which is context and mindset. And that was pretty much the concept where we talked about helping couples shift from being stuck to empowering themselves to break out of the impasse. And then the second element, communication and alignment, where it would teach techniques to improve the mutual understanding and get couples on the same page to make the relationship be more effortless. Does that sound like a good summary?
That is a fabulous summary. Very good.
All right. And then today we're going to try to get through elements 3, 4, and 5. But before we do, I know it's been a little bit of time since you did the show. Was there anything that came to your mind that you said, oh, I should have talked about that, or I should have mentioned this? Anything before we continue on?
Well, for those 2 elements, the only thing that I will add is for element 2, that communication skills also include apologizing properly.
Yeah, we sort of talked about that, but I think I sidetracked you.
Okay. So I just don't remember going too much in depth what I wanted people to take away. And so the main thing to know about it is that we want to make sure that we apologize, not just with an I'm sorry, because a lot of people don't even want to provide an apology. I'm sorry, right? But the apology needs to include what we are sorry for. And we can say, I'm sorry that your feelings are hurt, right?
Right.
So it's more, I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings, right? So what did we do? How did I hurt your feelings? Now, I might not agree that what I did was wrong, but it had an impact on you. So I could apologize for the impact that it had. So that's a much better apology.
Yeah, we did start to talk about that, but of course I sidetracked you with the comment of, why should I apologize if I'm not wrong?
Right. Okay. Very good. So did you want to add anything else to that, or do you want to flesh it out even more, or you think we're good with that concept?
No, I think that's good. And then people can go back and listen to what we said about that on part 1 of our episode.
Very good.
So before we get going with the others, let me again remind people, in case they listen to the shows out of order, you have a Metropolitan Marriage and Family Therapy that this is all based out of. This is something that you've done for quite some time. I think I mentioned the fact that you are one of the few people that started a program without being broke first. You have had a successful relationship your entire marriage, and I find that great.
Oh, well, thank you for that. We definitely have been on a journey, my husband and I. I'm not going to claim that we're perfect or that we didn't go through our issues. And I think I shared last time that my husband considers himself, and I consider him, my muse, in our relationship, our muse, and that I get inspiration from our conversations and observing our dynamics and how to do things. And so even though it hasn't been a perfect marriage, it has been an amazing marriage. And we have been together for a very long time. And yes, the work that I do did not come from an originally broken marriage or abusive relationships or whatever story people may have. I did start fairly early on, and I just wanted to always help couples.
Nice. And a lot of what you do is focused on, as I mentioned earlier, the busy professional. Your website, metrorelationship.com, is a site where people can go and, look up some stuff themselves. There's a content-based content. And then, of course, they can get the private sessions with you and all of that. And it's simply, for those of us that we have relationships that we want to keep going, we want to maintain, we like the person that we're with, but we're just stuck. We're busy. We kind of get off track. So that's what you help people do, is get back on track.
Yes, we help people rekindle their love, their passion, get back on the same page if they're stuck and feeling disconnected and just like, what the heck are we doing here? Are we even into each other anymore? Or people are fighting a lot. They're so disconnected that everything gets on their nerves. And we just help them mitigate all of that and get on the same page and rekindle their love.
All right. So let's continue on and make sure that we get through all 5 this time. And finish off with the 5 elements here. So I know that we did mention them at the end of the show. That way people would have an idea. And element 3 was clarity and dynamics. So describe to us what that means.
Okay. So a lot of times people don't understand, partners don't understand why they keep having the same fight, the same argument, or the same repeating patterns. They might make an agreement to no longer do that, or to stop doing certain things, to be nicer, to whatever it is. But then they repeat the same behavior or similar behaviors, right? And so whatever agreements are made get broken. So not only is there the injury of the thing that's being done, but also the broken promise and the broken agreement. And people keep repeating and looping around. So that's a dynamic piece. And the clarity piece is, okay, why is that happening? What is the driver of those repeating patterns? And then how do we change them? So that's pretty much the big concept of that particular element.
All right. So it's the relationship version of every year I say I'm going to eat healthy and get in shape, but then I never do, right?
Yes, pretty much. That's very good.
Okay.
That's right.
So I imagine that part of that would be helping people identify what the pattern is as to why, because obviously people say all the time, I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. But then if we don't, there's got to be a reason. So how do we help people identify what those reasons are?
Well, that's a very tricky part, right? What happens a lot with this is the hardest element out of the 5, because this is where the deep work happens. This is where we go finding the wounds and the unfinished business and the shadows and just like all the stuck emotional things, all this stuff that people usually like to gloss over, bury under the rug, or they're not even in touch with. And so they're not in touch with their feelings, they're not expressing their feelings, they're not getting their needs met. So all that stuff is happening. Plus you have the programming from younger that are the drivers for recreating the patterns in the present time. So you have the drivers from the past replicating, triggering things, and then our defense mechanisms create the patterns in the present time, keep the thing happening again. So let me explain it a little bit better.
Okay.
So something happens to me, right? My husband does something, I get triggered. His behavior might not necessarily be, air quotes, a bad behavior. Somebody else might not find it offensive, but for some reason it touches my sensitivities, right? My wounds, my old hurts, all my stuff, all the stuff that I bring from before. And so when it reaches me, I get triggered, I get upset. Now, the way I deal with that upset with defense mechanisms, unless I've been working on responding better when I get upset, usually we respond with defenses, reactivity. That, what I do at that moment triggers my partner's sensitivities. Then they respond with their own defenses, unless, again, they have done some work or they're more evolved, which those defenses then are very similar to what initially triggered me, and I get re-triggered. And so we keep the loop. That's a dynamic. And so what we want to do is, okay, what is the thing that's getting triggered? Number one. And then number two, how can I address that or respond differently so I don't trigger my partner and we don't stop on a bit, so we don't create the repeating loop. So those are the two the two places to go in. What's triggering me, and how do I address that in a way that doesn't trigger my partner?
Okay.
So that's the dynamics. That's how the loop, that's how people get stuck, right? So then that's the work.
I imagine that becomes difficult when people don't want to acknowledge that it's a trigger, right?
Yes. But so it depends on how we ask the questions and how we look at it, right? So we don't have to say, this is your wound from childhood, right? So, but if they're in couples therapy, they're okay, kind of go in there because that's the whole point. But some people are a little prickly. And so we just we make it a lot more, we normalize the language. Like, so what bothers you about that? Right. So very basic questions. What feelings come up for you?
Right.
And we don't have to call them wounds. We don't have to call them all kinds of things, right? That makes it more clinical. It's just a conversation, right? Curiosity, and things come up. And that's how we identify what's happening.
Now, okay, so I'm having thoughts about relationships that are in peril, which I'm assuming that most of the time your relationships are not. These are just people that they're busy. They recognize that they need to devote time to it. So they're not off the rails.
That's not true.
But I'm okay. Good. Glad you said that.
That's not true at all. We save marriages.
Okay. Because part of me is thinking that this could be an area where when you're talking about wounds, you're talking about baggage from previous relationships that cause a trigger. And it's a tough thing to acknowledge that, I'm bringing baggage from, a relationship, 2 people ago, as opposed to what's actually happening right here in front of us.
What's interesting is that it actually goes farther back than that. It goes back to childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And so any relationship that they've had since, the patterns are going to be very similar. The triggers are going to be the same. And so if we go back to the bottom of the origin, we don't have to go through all of the relationships to learn all of the things. You don't have to talk about all your exes in couples therapy with your current partner, right? We just get to the bottom of okay, so how did this wounds get started, or what created these things? And we don't have to go hang out in the past. We really do past digging. Just a quick so where might have this started, or how do you think this came about, kind of thing. And then from there, we say, okay, so if those are the feelings that came up, then they're coming up right now by what your partner's doing now.
All right. And I imagine that there are a lot more, because the things that pop to my mind, trust, abandonment, those are probably two of the big ones, but there's got to be neglect. A whole neglect. Okay.
Neglect, abandonment, you said. Yeah, neglect, being made small, dismissed, not heard, not valued, not having a voice, all those kinds of things come up a lot.
Okay.
So usually let's make it more tangible. Usually the partner that needs more connection, is the partner that had the wound of feeling abandoned and neglected. Their partner is usually the opposite. They need more space because they have the wound of being suffocated and controlled.
Oh.
Or something to that effect, right? So
right.
So my partner does something like, I want to hang out with the boys this weekend, or something like that, or I want to go away, blah, 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 blah. I want to do my own thing. What? You're leaving me? You're abandoning me, right? I get triggered. And of course, that's what you want to do. You're always leaving, right? That would be my response, potentially, right? I'm just making this up. So I would get all worked up about them not spending time with me, not having connection time, right? So my reactivity in my like, well, do you have to? I prefer that you stay, and I'm using reasonable language. Some people may say, you can't go. Some people get even crazier with this.
Right. And from the other side is like, I spent the last 2 weeks with you. I just need a break. I haven't seen the boys in, a month.
Well, but that's what the other person would say, right? So if I say like, you can't go, blah, 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 the other person would respond with that, but they wouldn't be so calm. They would be something like, well, I could do what I want, or you can't tell me what to do, right? It gets escalated so that they feel controlled, right? So that response, like, well, you can't tell you what to do. Like, well, you can't leave me. And it just escalates, right? So and people have their own language for this stuff, obviously, their own way of expressing these things. But so that's what happens in that the triggers are usually the opposite. This is like so beautiful the way it plays out, right? So what I need is the opposite of what you want to give, and it's your your weakness, if you may, or like your Achilles. No, that's not the phrase. Like your kryptonite, okay. Right, or something like that. So the thing that I need the most is the hardest thing for you to give, and vice versa. The things that you need the most, like space, freedom, do your own thing, whatever, is the hardest thing for me to give. And that's the stretch. That's how we get stuck. So if we stretch, we meet each other's needs.
It's that age-old adage of opposites attract.
That's right.
But how does that happen? Because there's got to be a way that you would acknowledge early on, oh, you're like that. I've already had that, and I'm not going down that road. But how do we keep ending up going down that road?
Oh, my gosh, that's a beautiful question. Well, so I don't know how much time we have for this, but I'll try to do it justice. So it's an unconscious process, right? So you could have the logical foresight to say, you know what, I am not going with those kind of people anymore, right? Like if they do this thing, that's it, they're out. Like that's my boundary, or that's my hard stop, or like that's my whatever. People make these decisions when they're dating, but people still fall in love with exactly that prescription, right? Or with that template, I should say, because there's all the unconscious patterns that are at play. That's where the love happens. It's not a logical decision to fall in love. You just fall in love. It's all the unconscious mechanisms that are at play. So when you first meet somebody, the unconscious mind is going like, hoo, this is an opportunity for me to stretch and grow and heal. You're going to stretch me to the nth degree. You're going to give me all of the things that I need so I could work on this stuff that's sitting here.
Mm. And you could be like, okay, I'm going to ignore all the stuff I said I would do because I like where this is right now.
What do you mean?
Well, if we go in with a template and we meet somebody, and regardless of what the attraction is, they're so beautiful, they say the right things, they're funny, I may forget about the template for a while.
The template, we don't know the template half the time, unless you've done work on yourself. The template's just doing its thing. It's a program, right? And so you don't even know. Unless people have done therapy and they're trying to figure out what to do, so they're aware and they have more, they're bringing all that stuff to the dating scene. People don't know what's the drivers and what's the attraction and what's the template and what's the patterns, right? So you just fall in love. It's like, ooh, okay.
Right. But if we say, I'm not going to go through that again, and then we meet somebody, we kind of forget all of that stuff. Right. Okay.
Right. We forget that we decided that we're not going to do this again because we fall in love again. And so we ignore the decision that we made. Plus, at the beginning, you don't really see that stuff, because at the beginning is the first stage of relationships. When we first fall in love, we didn't really let our hair down yet, right? So everybody's showing up with their best self, with the best, the social masks and all this stuff. And as soon as you make that higher level of commitment, that's when the patterns start kicking in.
Right.
Right. And the people are like, wait, what the heck?
That's right. The mask is off.
That's right.
I got you.
And also what happens is that at that moment, or at that stage in relationships, is that the things that you find so cute and adorable and quirky and not a big deal when you first met, now, because you have a higher level of commitment, now they're important. Now they get on your nerves. Right? Now this is the place where the work needs to happen.
All right.
It's not relationships are not for the faint of heart, right? As we know.
No, you got to be in it for the long haul. So, and their work.
Yep.
All right. So let's move on to element 4 and try to get through these. So after you've done all the work and kind of clarified everything, next is, this is where.
So before we switch gears, hang on, okay?
Okay.
So one more thing. I don't want to leave people with like, oh my gosh, that's just a formula for disaster and we're doomed to fail our relationships. That is not the message that I want to leave people with. What happens with those patterns is that once we identify, once I know that my trigger is abandonment in a nutshell and your trigger is suffocation, then I'm going to be intentional not to suffocate you and you're going to be intentional not to abandon me, right? So that's number 1. And then number 2, how do we ongoingly put in things to cultivate that? So I might say to my husband, how about you take the afternoon off or go do something or whatever? Like I offer the things, right? And he might offer the connection as opposed to waiting for those tension moments to give each other stuff or not to trigger each other.
Right.
So that intentionality about giving each other what we need, that's what heals.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to try to ask, getting into element 4, if you're trying to get into the connection and intimacy part, obviously you want to have done more work with the clarity and look for a resolution. But there's this, it feels like there's this slide that has to happen between element 3 and 4, right?
So the elements are not so linear like that. They're more like a spiral, like you kind of go circular. So you kind of work on them as you're going and you keep coming back around to go deeper and deeper and more in depth or higher and higher, however you want to look at this, where you don't have to finish 1 to move to 2, to move to 3, to move to 4.
Okay.
Right. So you could kind of tackle them as you're going and you could come back around and tackle them again at a different level and come back around. Right. Or tackle them simultaneously. So it's not like, oh my gosh, we're never going to get to intimacy. Right. Because if you want to heal yourself fully, you will never heal yourself fully. So you will never get to intimacy if that's the logic. Okay. There's no such thing, right? We're always growing and evolving and healing.
So you could be working on all 5 at the same time. So I guess it's more of a 5 fluid circles that are all connected. I don't know what the shape is, but you got 5 circles with an intersection in the middle, right?
That's a good visual.
Okay.
So for connection and intimacy, what we're striving for is to create connection and to sustain it. At the beginning, it's very easy because we're really curious and interested in the other person. But as we get busy, potentially we're busy when we first meet as well. Depends on the age that people are meeting and what their careers and life look like. But after the initial stage of falling in love and the honeymoon period, then people kind of go back to their regular lives, right? the usual schedule programming. And so then the busyness kind of takes over as opposed to people prioritizing their relationship or dating and let me make myself beautiful for the date and all these different things. Then it becomes more, okay, I got the person, fine, perfect. And now let's just weave them into our life and they lose the priority status. And life gets hectic, right? So then sometimes not only do they lose the priority status, they go to the bottom of the list, right? Partners, self-care and partnership are at the bottom of people's list, usually.
Okay.
Kids, business, work, career, all that stuff is at the top for some reason. Well, not for some reason, there's reasons, but beyond today's conversation. But if we don't prioritize, then the disconnect happens. And if we feel disconnected, then we nitpick at all the things that annoy us. And then if we look for annoying things, then we will find them. If we're feeling connected, we have more grace. And we don't let those things bother us so much. But if there's no connection, there's no cushion, then the things that bother us really grind and really bother us and hurt us.
All right. So you mentioned a couple of things that I was going to ask in terms of what challenges people face at this point, but obviously you mentioned just things getting in the way. Mm-hmm. And that sense of accomplishment and arrival. For instance, we're married, we're set, the race is over, and then that's it. So besides those two things, what are some of the other challenges that people hit when they get here? Because I have to imagine, and I'm trying to imagine what's happened in my marriage of 20 years as opposed to what others that, there's just things that deteriorate over time, but we don't always know the reasons.
Well, so when we get here, if we don't prioritize the relationship, we don't nurture it. Right? So like I said, it goes to the bottom of the priority list. And so we don't make time for it. We don't make time to look our best. We don't make time to spend quality time with our partner. We don't give undivided attention. We don't try to surprise them, woo them, take care of them, do the nice little things. We just go through the motions, right? And so it's hard to feel connected with that level of just transactional, superficial interactions. Sometimes people don't even have interactions. People are like ships passing in the night. Their schedules are so different and so hectic, they barely have any time together. And the time together, it's like minimum interaction, minimum depth, minimum being together. That's not connection, right? And then if you have all those things, then physical intimacy definitely suffers too, because the female gendered or energetic person in the relationship, the more female partner in the relationship needs connection to feel interested in sex. If there's no connection, they are not interested, right? And it takes a while for them to come to the place of being ready for intimacy. They're more like contextual sexual partners. Usually more male energy is more spontaneous. It is kind of ready to go all the time. Generally, now this is very simplistic language. There's exceptions to all the rules. But then there's a disconnect there too, opposites again, right? And so negotiating all the different things of life and balancing all of the different things can be challenging. And so we want to make sure that we are intentional, that we bring priority, that we make the time, that we create the context for that connection. So then we could go deeper in the connection and so that we could feel more depth, nourishment, fulfillment, that then we could take into the other realms for physical intimacy and everything else that we might want.
So it kind of feels like we're talking about the fact that you never stop dating.
Yes. I love the way you said that. That's exactly right.
Nice.
I actually have a protocol that's called Date Your Partner.
Okay.
That's the homework that we give our couples. You'll never stop dating. And the couples night or date, the date itself can just be very simple. How do I say this? Some people call dates very simple time together, which in my book, that's couple time. Date should be a step above, right? Like just more investment into that time together. And you can bring your husband head, your wife head, your partner head, your husband, father, mother head, all the roles and all the things. You just have to be the person. When you first met, there were no roles. It was just a person, a human being with energy. And that's where the attraction happens. When we're together for a while, then we have all these roles, all these responsibilities, all these things come up and then muck up the energy, and then we can feel the attraction. Right? So if we show up to the date with just us, yay, we create the spark again.
All right. Now, does this go back to the way that we ended part one, where we talk about scheduling all of this stuff? You schedule, date time, you schedule sex. Is that all part of this area here?
Yeah. So I call this connection habits, right? So this is perfect for your show because you love talking about habits. Yes. So this is where we invest and cultivate love and connection and nurturing in the relationship. So I like to teach people, start at the beginning of the day, from the moment you open your eyes through the rest of the day. How do you want the day to feel in terms of being in a relationship with your partner? Most people don't think about their partner all day long. I don't know anybody who does really, if you think about it, right? They might be back here somewhere, but like they're not very intentional about staying in touch, nurturing the relationship throughout the day. And so, okay, so what's the connection point in the morning? Is there like when you first part ways after you wake up? What's the connection point mid-morning or around lunchtime, like middle of the day sometime? A little bit after that. What's the connection point when you first get home? How do you guys reconvene or re-entry? Right? That's usually when people have conflict. At the end of the day, everybody's tired and people get home and all hell breaks loose, especially if there's children involved. That's one of the times. How do we do that time? Then how do we do night routine with the kids and everything else with the kids to bed? Now it's couple time. How do we do that? And then bedtime, how do we do that? Right? So there's a bunch of places where we could connect. How do we go about those touch points? One. Two, how are we intentional about them so they're rich? And then we have more specific kinds of connection habits, like debrief times, synchronizing meetings. These are all things that I teach our couples, just different specific ways of meeting so that you take care of the business of life and take care of all the different things that you need to do as a couple, either romantically or practically. So different kinds of being together, right. Couple time, connection time, synchronized time, daytime, or sexy time, all the times.
Now, I'm thinking of something, and I don't know if it falls in element 4 or element 5, okay. But I'm going to show a little personal side here.
Sure.
To where one of those things that in terms of our habits is when I get home from work, she allows for me to have decompression time.
Right. Good. So you get freedom, you see?
Right.
That's what usually what guys need. Very good.
But it's not, I mean, it's a habit that we got into, but it's not, like I said, I don't think it falls under 4, or does it? Because you're talking about these, you're talking about these.
Under 4.
Okay, all right.
It's part of the it's part. Well, if maybe that's falling into both, right? Because if you think about the flow of the whole day, the structure, the routine for the whole day, that's definitely 5. But I like to also put it in 4. And like I said earlier, the elements are not so discrete. So there's overlap, right? So right. Nothing's like exactly in this element, exactly in that element. There's a bit of interconnectivity here. But so the way that we could add it to element 4 is to think about it as like, okay, Marv is connecting to himself first, so that then he could be aligned and present to connect with me. You see, so that's still a connection place.
Well, so I was thinking of it from, if you go back to in the beginning when you're dating, you had that separation where you both worked, and then you went home, had your little downtime from work, then your preparation for the date. Maybe people didn't see each other for the week until the weekend and stuff. So that's kind of how I was looking at it as, you wanted to have a little bit of separation in order to look forward to the time together.
That's perfect. That's a great way of reframing that. Absolutely.
Okay.
So some people especially the partner who wants connection, everything's we, and they have to do everything together. And that's like the death of the other partner. And so the key is to find the balance between connection and separateness. So that's exactly right. Because we still want to be individuals. We can't just be a blob of we all the time, right? It's me, it's you, and it's us. And how do we find the balance so that we as individuals have a full, rich life, and then we bring yumminess to the middle, and we create a relationship that's amazing.
Okay. Now, are there exercises, or how do you get people to list out their connection points and follow through with them? I have to imagine that it's not as simple as writing down, I'm going to leave a note here at 3:30, or something like that.
Well, that's very specific to the couples. So it depends on who the couple is, their personalities, their lifestyles, their jobs, so that we kind of co-create that, and people bring their own brain and their own kind of desires and what makes sense for them and what each person kind of wants. And if the partner leaves a note and doesn't do anything for the other person, wasted effort, right? So it has to be things that make sense for the partners, the person who's doing it and the person who's receiving it. And they could agree to things. Some things could be put in place, and we call that time mapping. How do they use the whole week so that they get all of the aspects of life? This is now we're getting into element 5. All the aspects of life taken care of. So nothing falls out through the window and people are worried. Like I can't be present because I'm thinking about this other thing. No, there's a time and a place for everything. Right. And so aside from for the time mapping, then is like what you fill the specific times with. That's just very specific and unique to the couple.
All right. So we've kind of dipped our toes twice into element 5, which is collaboration and partnership. And that's why I was kind of there, because a lot of these things, it feels like a collaboration when you're going through the connection points. It feels like you're coming to this partnership agreement of this is what I need, this is what you need, and how do we work together to make them happen?
Right. That piece is definitely element 5. The piece that is part of element 4 more specifically is the actually meat of the connection.
Okay.
Right. So aside from the structural scheduling and the flow of life and time, then they actually have to show up to the connection. Right. And then how are we each showing up? Are we being vulnerable? Are we being available? Are we being present? There's all kinds of things that create intimacy. Aside from physical intimacy, just connection at a deeper level with somebody. Right. So that's the deeper work that happens with the connection element.
All right. And so that's why we have to look at these as not steps, but just part of a complete holistic approach.
Correct.
All right. So what else falls under collaboration and partnership?
So for collaboration and partnership, it's a few things that I like to highlight for people. So aside from, okay, what does our daily routine look like so that our life flows and it makes sense and all of our needs get met and everything has its right place? Then is, okay, so how do we take care of the business of life? Right? How do we actually collaborate? So creating systems for taking care of things, all the kids stuff, all the calendaring thing, all the financial things, all the events, there's just so much life things. And how do we get on the same page about those things and have each other's back and collaborate and co-create together? And then the piece that might get people is how do we clearly share responsibilities and divide and conquer? People get really tripped up with this.
I was going to say, did you just smirk when you said that?
Because it's funny how people, and it's not, I don't mean to laugh at people suffering because this really tortures people, and it's such a simple thing at the end of the day,
Okay. But is it the torture in terms of creating this shared responsibility as if to say, oh, well, this isn't 50-50. It's really 60-40 and trying to actually get that balance?
No, because people kind of agree that, because of our circumstances, I'll take care of 90% of the practical things in our domestic life because you work 100 million hours and you bring in most of the money. Therefore, the collaboration piece might feel lopsided, but in terms of life energy that you put into your career and work and contributing financially versus what I might contribute domestically equals that at the end of the day.
Okay.
Or something like that, right? So it's not so much dividing the chores 50-50, but it's dividing it in a way that makes sense for the couple.
Okay.
But the torture piece is that people make the actual practical things so much harder than they have to be because it's not about the practical things and they bring in all of their baggage into the conversations about the things. This is why it's element 5. Right? People sometimes come in with I don't get support in my relationship. I have to take care of everything, blah, blah, blah. But we can't even have that conversation about dividing chores because you have all of these scribes. You have all these communication issues. You're not setting things up properly. You're feeling disconnected. So everything's going to bother you. Him or her not picking up their socks, it's going to bother the crap out of you because you're feeling disconnected. But otherwise, who cares about a sock on the floor? Right? So we have to do some other things first before we start co-creating some of these other things. And that's where the torture comes in because people are setting so much more meaning and it has so much funky stuff that if people don't work on the other things first, then the torture happens. Right.
And so I guess I was thinking in that same term where people are nitpicking as to, you need to give more in this area. And the one person's like, okay, but I give so much more in this area.
Totally.
Okay.
Yes, 100%. And people don't appreciate what the other person contributes. A lot of times they only see what they contribute and they get hung up. Like, let me shove down your throat what I do. And you're trying to shove down my throat what you do. And we're just shoving stuff down. We don't get to see each other. And that's the human condition. We want to be seen. We want to be appreciated, right? We want to be valued. And so everybody's fighting for that. That's the power struggle. And goes back, then all this stuff from element 3 gets triggered at that point.
Okay. So you did mention that you've got to work through all of these things. And if we're looking at this as, a spiral, as you said, people can actually start to deal with this adversarial dynamic But I guess the question for me is, how do you help people make that shift? Because you can't just, if we're not dealing with this in steps, you got to start somewhere. So where do you start? That's
a beautiful question. My funny answer was going to be, you go for a master's in marriage and family therapy. Okay. That's how you help people. That's the funny answer. But to answer your question truthfully, is that we that's why we start with mindset, right? So when people first come in, we can't talk about you sharing responsibilities if your mindset is so weird. If you're really looking at your partner as your enemy, they're trying to get you, they don't give a crap about you, like they have all these funky thoughts and scripts and things going on, limiting beliefs, like all this programming in the mind and the thought patterns. Right? That's where the mess happens. So we definitely start there. We start with ownership. We start with boundaries, because that automatically suits everything down. And then we could start, then the communication skills comes almost immediately, like at the same time. And then we could go deeper into the wounds and triggers. And then we could talk about connection. And then we could get to co-creating, you see?
Okay. All right. So it's a whole process.
But we could be talking about collaboration while we're practicing the communication skills and fine-tuning the mindset, you see? So it doesn't have to be like, oh, it's going to take forever to change the mindset so that we could get to the communication. It's not like that. We could, right. Like I said earlier, we could be working on all the things at the same time.
Okay. So let me ask I don't know if this is a weird question to ask, but do you ever run across people that are like absolutely perfect in 2 of the elements, but they need help in 3 of them? Or, you know, is that type of a mix, or is it kind of across the board deficient?
Let's see. How do I answer that? I'm trying to think of the work.
Because here's okay. Let me ask it this way.
Yeah.
So
the question is very valid. The question is fantastic. Right. I'm just trying to see how that's fit, you know, from all the data that I have in my head from all the different couples, you know, what the answer is.
Because I'm thinking that there are people that could have a connection and an intimacy that they love, they value, you know, they've got the sex down, they, you know, pay attention to each other, but they're deficient in other areas. But I'm wondering if there's truly an overlap where maybe they're overcompensating in that one area because of the deficiency in the other areas. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I'm not sure that that's how it works.
Okay.
I think that, and I don't like the word deficiency. That's why I chuckled before. I think that when the couple is struggling, that it kind of shows up in all the elements. So just a little context, the elements came about from me working with couples who were really struggling, right? And so I did work with couples for many years. And after paying attention to the pattern of the work that I was doing, I'm like, we're working on these 5 areas. 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 Okay. And then I named the areas,
okay.
Right? There was a pattern to the work that I was doing. And so if people are struggling, they're pretty much struggling across these 5 areas.
Okay. So I apologize for using the word deficiency. I was trying to think of a healthy versus unhealthy concept, because my thoughts are is we can feel like we're, you know, actively healthy in one area, but we're not healthy in another area where we, you know, we may not have clarity, you know, most of the time, where our communication is fractured. You know, sometimes we say something that gets taken in the wrong context, but it's not intentional, if that makes sense.
It's usually never intentional. Right. And so, but if people's mindset gets, but this is the beauty of the interconnectedness of all the elements, right? And I know that you're not going to like this answer because you're looking for something concrete, but just bear with me. Maybe we'll get there together.
Okay.
So you say something that didn't mean to hurt your partner, right? It was unintentional, but your partner's feelings got hurt. Now something got triggered. That's element 3. Number 2 is the communication. The triggers. I'm sorry. Let me say that again. Whatever you said is communication. Whatever got triggered is it's clarity and dynamics. what your partner makes of it and what they do with it, now it's mindset. That's element 1, right? Now it affects the connection, or it all happen like that. The partner's taking it funky because if they're feeling disconnected, you see? So it kind of all interplays. But you're right. Some people have more skills in checking their mind and checking themselves. They know their partner's awesome, but they're still struggling somehow. They don't go to like the worst places that I've seen people go with their mindsets. Right. So they don't have to be terrible at it, but they have like really crazy communication and really escalation and really massive triggering points. People could have magnificent sex, but they still feel potentially emotionally disconnected.
Right.
But so, yeah, there's not going to be like across the board, all the areas are going to be equally a 1, right? So they might be a little bit better at some things than at other things, for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, no, I mean, I wasn't looking for like, the dagger as to this is it. I was just trying to imagine that there's got to be some ebb and flow in terms of, what is working in a relationship versus what isn't working. And maybe the degrees aren't as drastic in a lot of places. You know what?
I have an example. I have one couple that they consider their element 5, the collaboration and partnership, to be outstanding.
Okay.
So they were like, we get shit done, right? We make it happen. We figure it out. Like we grind, blah, blah, blah. We know what we're doing. We know how to take care of things, but their communication, terrible. And so they have massive escalation fights, like really bad, which would trigger a really funky mindset where every day they're threatening divorce. That all those triggers now at element 3.
Right.
But amazing sex and connection when they're getting along. That's actually very common.
Okay. So how can you have great collaboration with poor communication? I mean, is it only, if they're in alignment, they're great, but when they're not in alignment, that's where the friction comes in? I mean, right. Okay.
Yep. So the communication, they could communicate about tasks, but they couldn't communicate around feelings and
okay, that
connection.
That makes perfect sense,
right?
Especially for us men who don't like to talk about our feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then in her point, the couple that I'm thinking about with this, her point was like, we can't just jump in bed and have sex. I need some connection. I need some intimacy, right? Let's talk. And and that piece was very hard for him to do.
Right. Okay.
He was ready to go at any minute. Like, why is this a problem? Why do I have to jump through hoops so I could have sex? Right?
I'm ready. Let's go. Let's go.
All these things are very common.
If we take time to talk, it's going to pass. Right?
That's not true, because you guys are ready to go at any moment, supposedly.
Okay, that's another show.
Yeah, that's another show.
Okay. All right. So
I actually, Mark, just FYI, and for your audience, I have an episode on sex coming up the last Wednesday of the month on the 27th. So if people want to learn more about all of this, and we even talk about scheduled sex, so they could check it out.
All right. So that's a great segue, because I was going to mention your podcast again, Successful Relationship with Emma.
Yes.
You're on just about every podcast platform. So whatever your choice is, do the search there. I'll have a link to it in the show notes. And a lot of the stuff that we talked about, you actually go pretty in depth, and you have some other experts on with you and explain things a lot more clearly than I was doing.
You're doing fabulous. I love your questions and I love your insights. So amazing. So thank you.
All right. So there's the podcast, and then the website, metrorelationship.com. And you can actually get to the podcast from there as well as look at some of the other resources that she has. You've even got a download for exercises.
Yes. So people they're all free. So it's a 1-page downloadable. They're related to our monthly themes, and it walks you through a specific exercise so that you could apply it to a pain point. So like detoxing, all areas of your life. That we did that in March. This month, we're working on nurturing the relationship. It's all about relationship verbs, how to nurture the relationship. So your love could blossom. We have reparenting. We talked about the dating protocol. That's one of them. That's over there for people. There's all kinds of things in it, so people could definitely check it out.
All right. So I was going through there. You've got the one was spring cleaning for your relationship.
That's right. Yep.
Very nice. All right, Emma. So we've got through 5.
Yay!
Congratulations to us.
So we did it. I feel so accomplished.
Yes. Is there one kind of general point that can help sum this up? So in terms of, the successful relationship strategy, I have a feeling that there's something that would sum all of this up.
Thank you for that. Yes. So the one thought that I like to really instill in people, whether we have a 1-minute interaction or we work for a long time, and sometimes it's hard to still fully click onto this, is to focus on creating change through ourselves, not waiting for our partner to change, right? We can't change our partner. A lot of partners wait for their partner to change before they could show up properly or do what the things that they want to do and be the best partner. And the partner's doing the same. So now everybody's waiting. So nothing's changing, right? But instead, if I focus on what I could do different, how I could show up better, how I could be the best partner that I want to be, how do I stay loving and compassionate and affectionate and graceful and all of the things that I value and that we want our relationship to be sprinkled with, bam, now I'm inviting my partner to do the same. And by that, I automatically help create change, you see? So if I change myself or if I focus on what I could do, I induce, I invite, I encourage my partner to meet me, and then together we can create awesomeness. But if I don't do anything, I wait for them, and they wait for me, we're all going to be waiting.
Yeah, somebody's got to be first. So that's right. Make the first move. And then the other person, if they see that you're actively working, making a change, hey, you know what? If they're willing to change, I should be willing to change too. So it makes perfect sense. If
my partner's willing to show up, then maybe I should show up too. Sometimes it takes a little while for them to catch on, but let's be patient, right? Like just do your side. Don't do only if you see, oh, my partner's noticing. Okay, let me keep going. Oh, they haven't noticed. Forget it. It's all worthless. No, just keep going. 100% in.
All right. Emma, thank you very much for coming on the show. And thank you again, like I said, for coming back and finishing this up. I wanted to make sure we gave them their due. And I encourage you that if something else comes up and you'd like to come back on the show, I would welcome your visit.
Thank you so very much. I would love to visit again. Definitely.
All right. But folks, of course, go check out her podcast. She's got some pretty good episodes. I've listened to a few, which is why I was able to kind of throw out some great gems that
Very nice, Marv. Awesome.
But that's going to do it, folks, for this episode of the Unhealthy Podcast. Again, this is a show where we talk about much more than being healthy when it comes to diet and fitness. We're talking about the entire mindset. We're talking about relationships, and we'll continue to do that. And I hope that you would join us on this journey. So come back soon and figure out ways that we can change our habits and live healthy and be happy. See you soon.